She just turned down a guaranteed bag of cash bigger than anything women's golf has ever seen before, and what she said next stunned an entire sport. If you think golf is a slow, boring sport for retired men in pastel polos, stay right here, because what just happened on the LPGA Tour is bigger than anything happening in men's golf right now, and almost nobody outside the golf world is talking about it. A purse just hit $13 million. The biggest in the history of women's golf. And the woman standing in the middle of it, the reigning champion, just said something that every investor, every brand, every sponsor on the planet needs to hear. Minjee Lee looked straight into the cameras this week and said women's golf has always been a great investment. Not. Is becoming. Not. Might be. Always has been. And by the end of this video you're going to understand exactly why she's right, why companies are throwing more money at women's golf every single year, and why this sport that people called invisible just a few years ago is now one of the fastest growing investments in all of professional sports. Stick with me, because the numbers alone are going to blow your mind, but the story behind them is even bigger. So let's set the scene. This week, at Hazeltine National Golf Club in Chaska, Minnesota, the KPMG Women's PGA Championship kicked off with a purse of $13 million. That is not a typo. $13 million in prize money for one single women's golf tournament. To put that in perspective, when this tournament started its sponsorship with KPMG 12 years ago, the purse was $2 million. $2 million. Now it's $13 million. That is almost a 500% increase in just over a decade. Most investments in the world don't grow 500% in 10 years. Most stocks don't do that. Most real estate doesn't do that. A golf tournament purse did that, and it did it specifically for women. And here's the twist that makes this story even more interesting. The winner this week takes home $1.95 million. Just the winner's check alone. Last year, when Minjee Lee won this exact tournament, she walked away with $1.8 million. So in just 1 year, the winner's payout alone jumped by $150,000. And it's not just this tournament. This year, every single one of the 5 major women's golf championships increased their purse. Every single one. The US Women's Open went up to $12.5 million. The AIG Women's Open hit $10 million. The Amundi Evian Championship climbed to $9.1 million. The Chevron Championship reached $9 million. 5 majors, 5 increases, all in the same year. That has never happened before in the history of this sport. Now you might be thinking, okay, that sounds like a lot of money, but is it actually a lot compared to men's golf? And that's a fair question, so let's be honest about it. The most recent men's majors have paid out somewhere between $17 million and $22.5 million. So yes, the gap is still there. Nobody is pretending it's closed. Even Minjee Lee herself, standing on the range before her first round this week, said it plainly. She said it's not the same, but it's getting better. We are going in the right direction, but we also have a little way to go as well. That's not spin. That's not corporate marketing language. That's one of the best golfers in the world being completely honest about where her sport stands. And that honesty is exactly why people are starting to trust the growth of women's golf, because the people inside it aren't pretending the job is finished. They're showing you the receipts of progress instead. So who is Minjee Lee, and why does her opinion on this carry so much weight? If you don't follow golf closely, let me give you the fast version, because her story is the perfect lens to understand why this investment narrative is real and not just hype. Minjee Lee is from Perth, Australia. Her parents emigrated from South Korea in the early 90s, and golf wasn't handed to her, she built her way up through it. She became the #1 ranked amateur golfer in the world back in February 2014, while she was still a teenager, and she held that ranking until she turned pro later that same year. She didn't explode onto the scene overnight either. Her first LPGA Tour win came in 2015, at the Kingsmill Championship. Then more wins followed, in 2016, 2018, 2019, each one building her reputation, but here's the part that's almost unbelievable. Even after rising to world #2 in the rankings, an Australian newspaper once described her as the invisible champion of Australia, because almost nobody back home knew who she was. Let that sink in for a second. One of the best golfers on the planet, and her own country barely recognized her. Then in 2021, everything changed. She won her first major championship, the Amundi Evian Championship, and the way she won it was insane. She was 7 strokes behind in the final round. 7 strokes. In golf, That's basically game over for most players. But she clawed her way back, caught up, and beat her opponent on the first playoff hole. That win put her on the map in a way nothing before it had. Then came 2022, and this is where the money story really starts. She won the US Women's Open, and that victory earned her $1.8 million, which at the time was the largest single payday in the history of women's golf. The purse for that tournament was $10 million total, the highest ever for a women's event up to that point. She won by 4 strokes. The runner-up still walked away with over $1 million herself, which was actually historic too, because it was the first time in a women's golf tournament that 2 different prizes both exceeded $1 million each. 2 players, 2 7-figure paychecks, same tournament. That had simply never happened before in this sport. And she kept climbing. In 2025, she won the very tournament we're talking about today, the KPMG Women's PGA Championship, in conditions that were honestly brutal. The host venue that year was new. It was the first time the event was played at a course built and owned by the PGA of America, and several top players, including world number 1 level talent, openly criticized the setup. The pin placements were tough, the course management drew complaints, play was slow, and on top of all that, the weather was unreasonably hot and windy. Minjee Lee herself admitted afterward that she wasn't playing her best golf heading into that week. She said she went into the tournament without her game, just trying to take it one day at a time because conditions were so rough. And somehow, in the middle of all that chaos, she won anyway. She said the difficulty actually helped her stay more present, more focused on just the next shot instead of the bigger picture. That mindset carried her to the title, and that title is exactly why she's the defending champion walking back into Hazeltine this week with a target on her back. But here's something that makes this year's story even juicier. Last year's tournament had a massive problem nobody in golf wanted to admit out loud. Television viewership for the final round hit a record low. Only 428,000 people watched on average during the final round broadcast. Compare that to the year before, 2024, when Amy Young won at Sahalee and the broadcast pulled in 867,000 viewers. That's more than double. So in one single year, viewership for this exact tournament collapsed by over 50%. If you were a sponsor watching those numbers, you'd have every reason to panic, every reason to pull your investment, every reason to say this sport isn't growing fast enough to justify the money. Instead, KPMG did the complete opposite. They looked at a tournament coming off its worst viewership year ever, and they responded by increasing the purse to the largest in the history of the sport. Let that contrast sink in. Viewership down, but investment up. That is not how most businesses operate. Most businesses see falling numbers and they cut spending. KPMG saw falling numbers and they doubled down. So why would they do that? The answer comes straight from the man who actually approved this decision, KPMG's US Chair and CEO, Tim Walsh. When the option came across his desk to make this purse the biggest in the sport's history, he said it was such an easy decision that he leaned straight into a record-breaking number. He said when KPMG started sponsoring this tournament 12 years ago, the purse was $2 million. Now it's $13 million. He called that almost a 500% increase in support for the female athletes competing in this event, and he said he's proud to do it alongside the PGA of America and the LPGA Tour. But the part that really matters, the part that connects directly back to what Minjee Lee said, is when reporters pushed him on the actual return on investment. Because at the end of the day, KPMG is not a charity. They're one of the biggest professional services firms in the world, and they don't spend $13 million on a feeling. So what's the real payoff? Walsh laid it out clearly. He talked about media exposure, broadcast coverage, brand elevation, and the ability to bring clients to this event and showcase the brand right alongside the athletes the world is watching. This week alone, the tournament has close to 100 hours of broadcast and digital coverage across NBC, Golf Channel, and Peacock. The number of featured groups being streamed live for free has doubled compared to last year. More caddies are getting mic'd up than ever before, giving fans an inside look they've never had access to. And for the first time ever, every single one of the 156 players in the field will get access to AI-powered player reels after their round, breaking down their game hole by hole with real analytics. That's not just prize money. That's a full technology and broadcast upgrade built entirely around making this sport more visible, more engaging, and more valuable to everyone watching. And here's where the LPGA's own leadership gets refreshingly honest. The LPGA commissioner has said publicly that the tour is, in his words, very clear-eyed about why sponsors actually show up and fund this league. It's not pure charity. Sponsors do it because they're inspired by the sport, sure, but also because it leads directly to business outcomes for them. And he said if the LPGA wants purses to keep growing, and he made it clear they absolutely want that, the tour has to go out and earn it. Earn the viewership. Earn the engagement. Earn the broadcast numbers. That's a tour leader basically saying, we know this is a business relationship, and we know we have to keep proving our value to keep this growth going. That kind of transparency is rare, and it's exactly why brands keep trusting this sport with bigger and bigger checks every single year. Now let's zoom out, because the purse increases this year aren't isolated to just one tournament. This is happening across the entire sport simultaneously, and that pattern is the real story here. The U.S. Women's Open purse climbed to $12.5 million, an increase of $500,000 from the year before. The AIG Women's Open in the UK rose to $10 million, up $250,000. The Amundi Evian Championship in France went up to $9.1 million, an increase of $1.1 million in a single year, one of the largest jumps of any major. And the Chevron Championship rose to $9 million, up $1 million. 5 tournaments. 5 separate sponsors, separate boardrooms, separate decision makers. And every single one of them, independently, chose to increase their investment in women's golf this year. That's not a coincidence. That's a trend, and trends like this don't happen by accident. They happen when the underlying product is proving itself valuable enough that multiple companies are competing to be associated with it.